I think I'm just going to ask the questions that I think our friends from Africa would want me to ask. And so the summit is organized. Tomorrow we'll hear from African leaders here virtually from heads of state, and they will share with us the opportunities that Africa has in business by sector and where their needs and opportunities are. Then we have a series of connectors from the World Bank and USAID and development banks and Ted Yoho with a BUILD Act and a pot of development funds for Rob Mossbacher.
I'm familiar with the BUILD Act.
And that piece, so those are the connectors. And then we got about 70 high-end CEOs coming in that are looking for opportunities to invest. And so mainly for our African guests, if they're trying to navigate that connection scene through DC, their main question is going to be, who should they connect with? Yeah. Who do they trust? That's why the shared values piece is so important. As congressmen, we know intuitively that'll never happen.
Right.
That might happen. So just a wide open question. Yeah. If they're asking you, who do I connect with? Where do I start the process? And how do I move forward?
You know, it's an important question. I saw this. State Department has a huge economic team, right? Almost every embassy, we have multiple officers with the sole duty of helping American businesses be successful. And, excuse me, they do a less good job of helping businesses in the country, which they are the ambassador, finding opportunities in America. We each, of course, is consistent with our role, right? They're diplomats on behalf of the United States, but these relationships are mutually beneficial. And so I saw this. Big companies have no problem. Big companies can often find their way through. They've got big legal teams, big teams that can travel. They'll have a sales team in country or in the region, so that's all true. For smaller opportunities, I think it's events like this one that create the real opportunity, because what it permits you to do is to bypass, and I can say this as someone who served in a big bureaucracy, it lets you bypass the enormous bureaucracies, which, however well-intended, often don't have the knowledge or the nuance or the granularity to help you actually connect with the opportunity as it really is. It's not possible for a Commerce Department person or a State Department person to really understand your business and the opportunity and how it is you can deliver value to someone, a company here in the United States, or frankly, a company in Canada or in the West. So I would encourage you to work on building out those relationships, because in the end, it is those relationships. And we all know how this works. You'll meet someone tomorrow, and they'll know someone who knows someone who knows someone. But you will have a warm entrance. You will have something that is more than transactional, but rather can be transformative for what it is you're trying to do, and can actually deliver an extended relationship that can help you build out on an opportunity. And so you should turn to your diplomats from your home country who are here. They'll try mightily. You should use U.S. resources to the extent you can. I'd encourage that. But know that it is often the case, if you can get directly in front of commercial business people who have capital to invest, or products to buy, or the capacity to be part of a supply chain that you need to build your business, you're much more likely to be successful.
Thank you. You made some remarks about China and the Uyghurs and some of the repression there. And they're building debt traps across the whole Belt and Road region. And some of them are in Africa. And so what broad argument, we have folks, South Africa knew they'd be quarantined 2 months ago. We have a huge contingent from South Africa watching. Other countries, Liberia had some issues. Nigeria, a few governors who are very interested in this. What guidance would you say, why is the USA, why do we have shared values that will complement Africa? In the past, we haven't always got it right. In the past 20 years, I've heard we've been distant, but now China's not distant, but they're present in a bad way. Why are we the partner you want to partner with?
Yeah, so with the caveat, of course we get it wrong sometimes. The best laid plans. Our administration didn't get everything right either. But I must say that I think history will reflect, and I found, frankly, most of my counterparts throughout Africa understood this intrinsically, that the United States is a force for good. That when we get it wrong, it wasn't through malfeasance, but through just bad practice. The intent was noble, the understanding was good. If you were to ask, the biggest contrast is that when American businesses show up, they're there very clearly to improve what it is they're doing, and they are not directed by the United States of America. They're there They're there for a commercial enterprise, and there is no political agenda that is tied to that. I know of no case where during my 4 years I saw a company come to me and say, hey, we're trying to do business in Nigeria. And I said, hey, that'd be great if you would do X, Y, and Z on behalf of the government. We'd be happy to help you. It just doesn't, we don't roll that way, right? That is not the case for the Chinese Communist Party. I get completely how attractive some of these opportunities are. They show up with either a cheap infrastructure project or an inexpensive capital structure associated with it. And in a country that is resource constrained, there's enormous appeal to that. I never, frankly, told any country they shouldn't do it. I simply said, make sure you're calculating all of the costs, because some of them are just off balance sheet. And they are what the investment community would call a long tail liability. Make sure you're accounting for those appropriately, because if you miss them, you may be fine, but your children and grandchildren will live in a society that is not one that you'd be proud of, not one that's connected to the value set that brings you all to this amazing, beautiful campus with its own worldview that is important and consistent with the best that the United States has to offer. And so we, as leaders, have the responsibility to try and make American businesses more attractive and do the things we can. You said you've got USAID here, we've got the Export-Import Bank, we have tools to do that. But in the end, if you just compare unit price to unit price, and the Chinese Communist Party wants to exert political influence in your country, that'll be an easy decision. Don't let it be an easy decision. Make the right decision, make the values-based decision. And in the end, and I don't mean in 100 years, but in 2 or 5 or 10 years, you will be rewarded for that.
I don't know if there's a good answer to this one, but if you're advising our friends here, many are interested in the BUILD Act. It was OPIC was about $30 billion fund. Yoho wrote a piece. I think it's up to $70 billion pot for economic development and public-private partnerships.
Yep.
Is it worth taking the time and the process and the consultants to go after that pot? Or are you just better off making connections and going business to business and trying to do it that way?
David, I would argue that you ought to pursue both paths in parallel. This would be my argument. Yep. You ought to do your best to find it and do it straight up and not suffer the pain of working through the BUILD Act process, because everybody knows there's a bureaucracy attached to that. There's a burden and a cost associated with that. Having said that, it's a lot of money. It's a significant amount of resources and can make the deal more lucrative for all of the partners that are connected to it. I've seen some projects that are on the drawing board that I think the BUILD Act will be a perfect fit for. And so to the extent you have the capacity to do both, to do them simultaneously, I think that presents your best option. I'm confident that some of these that look perfect for the BUILD Act will ultimately decide not to take that money, not to use that money, and that they can finance and underwrite it without U.S. governmental support. But there'll be some for which that money will be the bridging financing that gets them to the other side and allows that project to truly flourish.
That's great. I'm going to veer into theological land for a minute. We have Congressman Dean Hurt with us in the audience. He makes the argument that this is the best congressional district in the country. For various reasons, we debate all the time and have fun. I know, see, there he goes. That's where I'm heading. And so we teach our students, obviously, here the Judeo-Christian tradition. And I hope we're teaching all of them that tradition came first, both historically and theoretically. After that, you get Magna Carta and the founders and the Constitution and James Madison and Adam Smith and free markets and the richest nation that ever lived. And so that matters. I'm going to try to be delicate on this. Some folks out there, more radical views, are challenging, and it seems to me, trying to deconstruct all three of those pieces: the Judeo-Christian religious tradition, the constitutional framework we have, and free market economics. And I haven't seen that these radical groups have any replacement for the religion, or a replacement for the Constitution, or a replacement for a free market economic system. And so if you're teaching our students, which you are right now, what would you tell them about these radical pretenders versus the great grounding we've had in this country through our years?
So full-on bias. I am an evangelical Christian. I've spent my time in public life making clear that the Bible informs everything that I do. My wife would tell you that doesn't mean I get it right every day. She describes me as an authentic Christian, which is probably generous on some days. But there is no value system that can replace the understanding that our founders bequeathed to us. We are incredibly blessed. Many of your nations are blessed in the same ways and have the same founding ideas. They come from different traditions. I was in Jakarta with the world's largest Muslim organization. If you look at the founding documents in Indonesia, the ideas, they're not, right, this is Muslim, it's an Abrahamic religion, but the ideas, the central underpinnings of the things that have made America so exceptional are eternal and unchangeable and immutable. And only when America moves away from that is our republic at risk. And so, for all those Liberty students sitting out there, you are blessed to have this opportunity. Use it full well. Challenge that central proposition I put forward. But I am confident that you will all find that these understandings about how markets work and make people more prosperous are indeed grounded in a Judeo-Christian understanding of the world as well. And that when you get that right, basic things like the Golden Rule all flow from the history and nature that was given to the United States of America by our founders. But first, of course, the rights came from God, our Maker. And if you acknowledge those two things, that the Lord gave us these rights and our founders put them into our founding documents in a way that allowed us to be a nation that is so richly blessed, I am confident that we will all continue to do good things and good things together, and that history will reflect on that well.
Super. Thank you. You always have a smile on your face. You've always been a warm person to be around.
My wife says I need to smile more, so thank you.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
It's clear you have an inner sense of joy. You said in other speeches I've heard recently that your life has been blessed.
Yeah.
This country, in the good book, even the chosen people, if they don't listen to God and they walk off in the desert, God's still right here. But if the people go walking off in the desert, God cries and says, I want you back. How much of a reservoir do we have left of that Judeo-Christian tradition? The founder of this school, Jerry Falwell Sr., had the moral majority. Do we have a moral majority? Do we have 51% that will rely on that to move us forward, or do we need to do some heavy lifting to get there?
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do. I don't want to guess at the numbers.
Yep.
But there's much work to do. We all need to remind ourselves to continue to be faithful and to work at this and to do so in a way that is fearless. And I know, I get it, that's not always easy. I'm reminded, it's a fun story with my son. We were walking down the halls of the State Department on the first day that I was going to be sworn in. I was the CIA director at the time, and we passed all the previous Secretary of States and their portraits, and there's Madison and Jefferson and all these great people. And my son says, Madison, Jefferson, Pompeo. I don't think so, right?
That's great. That's
right? Like the Sesame Street thing, which one of these doesn't belong here? And then it was the next day that the New York Times pronounced me soon to be the worst Secretary of State of all time. And my son said, Dad, I saw this guy named, he couldn't remember the name. He goes, but he only lasted 11 days. Surely you'll beat him. I mention those because, look, those of us who are faithful and believe and are working at this in a way that is sincere and diligent are going to find ourselves having those who want to challenge us and undermine us and take this away from us, because they know if they can do that. They know if they can either silence us or pull away our faith or cause us to be dour and sad and angry, that they'll prevail, and the history of America will be forever changed. And that's what they want, and we can't permit to happen. And so while I think there is always a heavy lift and there will always be a real burden on each of us, I am very optimistic that in the end, He is watching over all of us, watching over every nation, and that He is watching over the United States and knows that we have in fact been a force for good in the world, and that our missionaries go out with noble intention, and that our diplomats go out trying to make the world better, and that he's going to make sure that the United States of America continues to be this really special place and creates opportunity for not only the American people, but for people all across the world as well.
That's
I
great.
pray that that's the case.
That's great. What you're talking at one of the major Christian universities in the country. What counsel would you give to young people? What books should they read? What are your top couple you enjoyed when you were growing up, being first in your class at Harvard and all that kind of thing?
Yes. So I won't give any particular book, although I'm happy at some point to maybe I'll tweet out my five best.
Good.
But I always found the most valuable reading for me was history.
Yeah.
It always provided a grounding. It reminded me that most of the things I encountered every day weren't unique. It may have felt like it. Yeah. Secretary Baker, who was Secretary of State before me, I called him. He was always very kind to me. And I called him one day, and I'm sure from his perspective it sounded like I was whining. And I told him about problems we were having with country X and Y, and he stopped me about halfway through and said, "Young man, I dealt with all those things too. Just get over it." And I mentioned that because as you think about the things that we need to do, right? I told my son, and I've told countless young people, look, there's three ways. I have seen lazy people be successful, not very often. Work hard, right? Be willing to work hard, find a passion, work your tail off, and good things will often happen. Not always, but not every day, but with great frequency. The second thing is keep your faith. If you lose that, then all of the hard work that you do will be misguided, misdirected, or will lead to very little. Work hard, tell the truth, keep your faith. If you do those three things and you read widely, you will benefit yourself and benefit those that are around you as well.
That's great. I think I would circle back a couple. You got time for a couple more?
You bet.
All right. Circle back to Africa and strategy. When we're in dialogue with our African friends, some of the friends will say, look, the government is the decision maker. So you should practically deal at that level. But some folks have kind of the American spirit and say, well, you need a revolution from beneath. And we need to build at a grassroots level from below. Your counsel?
I have faith in the individual. In the end, things that are built from the smallest organizations. Our founders talked about the little platoons. You go back and read the Federalist Papers. This was central to their understanding and conception of the United States, which was today it'd be denominated differently, whether it's a town hall meeting or a city council meeting or the parents at a school who come together. We would call them the Parent-Teacher Association. Or the bowling league, or wherever it is you find yourself in your community, at your church. Those are the places that create lasting change in communities, not just in nations, but in smaller communities as well. And so, never been a big believer in the capacity for top-down change. You can force things in certain places, but in the end, most of the good things, most of the sustainable things, most of the improvement in the quality of life of individuals around the world comes because some set of people joined together and held hands and moved heaven and earth along with their maker to make life better.
That's great. Very good. I think I'll two more. One, Eric Bethel brought up, and I worked at the World Bank 30 years ago as a rookie, straight out of school. And Eric runs the place. And we both had the same intuition. They, along with a lot of institutions, do a lot of great things. They do education, they do the environment, they do political issues, they do these issues, they do various takes on education, et cetera. But if you don't have an economic machine that's running underneath all of that, all of those pieces have to be paid for. And so Eric said, all those pieces are great, right? They're all great. And even in this country, the machine, I'm not sure if it's running. We're shoving $10 trillion into the machine to keep it running right now. And so what counsel would you give on the priority of placing those things, because investment dollars are scarce? Do you invest in business proper to incentivize investment in business? A lot of these countries are very interested in infrastructure. You need that to have the business. And then there's all the human rights issues and the hierarchy of goods above that that are attractive. But how would you emphasize where to start, and can you sell that to the people? That's a hard sell.
Yeah, it's a complex question, and I'm not sure there is I'm not sure there's a definitive answer that is good for all places and all times. The Bible would teach you that you ought to teach the man to fish. And so there is something central about investing in education. And that education can be wide-ranging. We talked about reading history, but it can be much more basic than that in places that are truly in dire straits, right? Teaching people a skill, teaching people the capacity to create a craft, to create value, teaching people to teach others, right? Train the trainer is the central idea. There are very few institutions, there are almost without, I can't think of an exception where a nation began to flourish without the capacity to educate its people. And that, of course, starts with family and the culture that's around that. So I don't think of education necessarily being as a government-centered, top-down educational system, but all the cultural traits that come with the things that family and church can teach as well. And so to the extent you're having to make difficult choices about research allocation, I always believe that if you can give people a foothold and the capacity to learn and increase their knowledge and decrease ignorance, you're doing a really good turn for the long run.
Super. I think I'll close on a positive. All these have been fantastic answers and guidance and everything. The next question is the only one the press will pick up. Tell us about your future.
Yes. Well, I'm headed back home tonight.
Good.
And tomorrow I'll be in New York City.
Very fascinating.
Exactly. Look, I've had this enormous opportunity these last 4 years to serve America and President Trump. I was able to work on lots of issues that I care an awful lot about. One of the issues that came to the forefront, and we made some real progress, was on religious freedom, so I intend to stay very engaged in that. Right. I have other things that I have strong opinions about as well. I'll continue to speak out on them as well. The American educational system is something that needs an awful lot of work too. I was not just talking about other places that need to work on their educational system. The United States has real challenge, and it is culture. Our educational system, our government school system, is absolutely under attack from those who want to undermine the very things that Liberty University and many of us in this room care about. And then, who knows? Your question was kind of a softball with respect to what's going to happen in 2024, and I must say, I have no idea what I'll be doing in a year or two. I'm going to work hard. As a political matter, I'm going to work hard to make sure that people who are Christian believers and conservatives are elected to Congress, so that I think we can get our nation headed back in the direction that we were working on for these past 4 years, and then we'll have to see what the Lord provides.
Great. Well, with that, yes. I just want to share with you personally the depth of respect this room has for you. They've shared with me personally, privately. I don't know if you get to hear all the accolades and the thanks, but this room respects you. They admire you, and this room, we love you in the name of our Lord Jesus.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Thank you.